I remember my father actually told me he met Nelson Mandela years ago. Mm-hmm. And he said again, when he met him, he said he just oozed forgiveness. That's what he said. He just oozed forgiveness. And
wow.
And for someone who could have been obviously insanely bitter to just, and those are the leaders we want to follow. And so trying to get people, not just I want to change the world, but are you willing to change yourself? Mm-hmm. That's a servant leader. Are we going to look at ourselves? Are we willing to take out the trash, to, do the, are we above certain things, or are we willing to actually get our hands dirty?
Yeah.
So that's what we're after, because that's what lasts.
Hi, Katherine.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So we met in Washington. Where did we meet?
California.
Oh, it was California.
You probably just come from Washington. Very good, yeah.
That's right, Santa Rosa. We'd just given a talk there, and you came to visit us after the show with your dad.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That was great to meet your dad and to meet you.
Well, my father's a minister, but he came out of, he was a Marxist socialist at one point, was very active in a very good way, was active in the civil rights movement, was at UC Berkeley. And
in what years?
In the 60s, mid-60s. I remember when he graduated. But he was involved, incredible, got to, meet Malcolm X and all the Black Panthers. I mean, he was around an incredible time period.
That's for sure.
In the United States during that time, and obviously pivotal moment for our history, and was very passionate about change. And he was an athlete, and so having experienced all sorts of issues around racism and such, was very passionate about that and really wanted to change the world, went into the Marxist socialist ideology, but found that it, in the end, as we believe, is pretty fruitless and doesn't produce the fruit that you're looking for. So when he came out of that, he was actually pretty disillusioned and had disillusioned to the point of suicide, and had a very clear encounter with Jesus Christ that changed his life. When he got into that, though, he was very frustrated when he became a Christian, because he literally said, "Lord, if anything, just please don't make me a Christian."
Is that right?
He literally said that. And I think many of us who've walked in the faith world can understand why he'd make that statement.
Yeah.
We're not always the best examples.
Right.
And how we do things, or what we say and what we emphasize. And he was very frustrated when he first got saved because of just the attitudes of many Christians. And one of those areas was the lack of thinking and really caring about the earth Christians. So much emphasis on heaven and just getting out of here and all the bad things in the world, instead of what we believe you're called to, is to actually make a difference in the world and actually help change it for the better. So the organization that I work for, he founded back in 1979, and I grew up with that organization under him, with years of traveling to different countries and states.
How old were you when he started on this journey?
Well, he started Go Strategic is the name of the organization, although back then it had a different name. It used to be called Strategic Christian Services. It was founded in 1979. He started traveling actually extensively when I was born. I make jokes about that.
So your whole life, really?
My whole life, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which generally we wouldn't recommend the father being away that much, but God's grace was on it for us. And I think for any working parent, that does a lot. As much as you can bring your children into it, it doesn't feel as much of a void that way. So he always said, "You guys are just as much a part of this as I am. You enable me to do this. I'm doing this for you, for the world," bought us into the mission. So I think I knew actually from a pretty young age I'd end up working with him because of the nature of our relationship that way. So so grew up going, he took us traveling all the time, which was wonderful, which I know you've experienced too with your family, that I think the benefit of travel and getting to know other cultures and other people for perspective and all that. So years of growing up with him that way, and basically the organization, Go Strategic, really is trying to help Christians not only think, but impact the world with the godly principles, with the transcendent principles, really, which say whether you're a Christian or not, there's certain things we know that truth just works. And so we really work to educate and equip people in those in those areas, and have people really understand not just what to think, but how to think.
Now, when do they come to you? How do they find you? And why do they find you?
So that's a great question. We have really grown relationally. One of the key tenets that we always push is that God builds relationally. And, you can advertise, and that's not bad, and different things. But what we found, in particular for the people that we really want to connect with, are people that really want to build a better world, not just build their brand or their own personal motivation that way, agenda, but actually really work for the greater good. And so relationally building that way helps because people are vetted. You know them a bit. So most people who've gotten connected to us over the years, and we're on almost every continent now, it's been just years of relationship. Someone finds out who you are, they like the content that you're bringing, the spirit that you're bringing, and they want to be a part of it. And then we really work too to bring those people together, which I know is a lot of the heart of, we're at the ARC event right now. I know that's the heart for those kind of organizations too.
Right.
To bring the right people together because collaboration is so important. So
yeah, and it's not up to a few of us. It's up to all of us.
Yes.
And that's what we have to do.
Yes.
Which is big. It's as big as it gets.
Yeah. And yet it starts on a local level, though, which is what I love. If we can understand and they've been talking about that at the event too, localism, if we start where we are, and we obviously do need to influence public policy. There's a both and. We need to vote. We need to be active on the broader thing. Yeah. But locally, it starts with our family. It starts with our neighborhood. It starts with our, voluntary associations. And if we're not active there, then, and that's something that I always look for with people that we work with. Because you hear a lot of people talk big picture and they're excited about these big things, but then you ask actually what's their family like? What do their neighbors say about them? What are they actually doing locally? And sometimes it's a different story. So finding people that are consistent that way says a lot.
When I was married first, my husband was a university professor and I worked as a therapist. So we had, and he was a therapist. So that's pretty... he's in an office, I'm in an office. My kids, my son's wife has opened a cafe, a neighborhood cafe. And so now, and it's really walking distance from their house and the kids' school. And so their cafe is open from, I think, 7 to 4, right? So it's a lunchtime place. And they just opened it. And I've just seen it for the first time when I went home. And it's on a sunny side of the street. So the sun comes shining in. She has a little place on the in the corner for kids. Yeah, that's wonderful. So that they can play there. And it's just it's a neighborhood place and it feels very comfortable. And the coffee is good. And she has a baker who's baking for them. And I think, because that's different, and my daughter, although she has Peterson Academy, she wants to open a speakeasy or something. So here's another community thing that she wants to open. And I think, isn't that interesting? Both my kids are opening community-based shops. And Jordan and I didn't do that. But now, of course, we're traveling all over the world. And it's such a... It's just something to notice. It's like, something's changed. We're getting involved in the community. That's good. Yeah. It's good.
The desire for community. And what more than a local business? Because, that ties so many different things together when it's a local business that way. And I love seeing that. And I actually, side note on me, I had a dance studio for 20 years.
You look like a dancer.
I still teach one dance class a week. Okay. I couldn't quit cold turkey when I took on the position I have now at the organization I work for. But for years, I had a dance studio. And it's just being in the local community is huge. Yes. I mean, it gives so many neat opportunities for cross-pollination with different people and just ear to the ground for what's going on in your community. So I love that your kids are doing that.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful opportunity and I think it's probably a shift too culturally for us now we've had so much emphasis on the global, which there's benefits to, obviously. But going back again to that localism, if we don't have that human contact and that local community, we're
Then
missing.
do, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we're actually going to spend half our time with my son and half our time with our daughter. So we'll be able to also be part of that, and that'll be good. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Family, right?
Yes.
All about community.
Yes. Very important. And everybody can start there. That's the thing. Everyone has a local place that they can start with any of the problems of the world, right? We need to start in our own backyard.
Mm-hmm. So Go Strategic then is a leadership endeavor. And what does that entail?
So I guess going back to some of my father's history, the founder of the organization, we believe that the Bible has got tons of timeless, transcendent principles in it that we can use that apply to every area of life. Mm-hmm. And really that we can think, if you can think presuppositionally, you can pretty much dissect any argument. So one of our main key tenets is understanding how to think presuppositionally. What are the big ideas, really in some ways small ideas when it gets down to it, behind our beliefs? And so we really emphasize that presuppositional thinking, critical thinking.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yes. So I have a little worldview handbook that I wrote on this, actually summarizing my father's
the one I was supposed to read that I haven't read.
Okay.
But we're going to talk about it now.
Yes. So I wrote this little handbook on worldview. For many people, at least in Christian circles, when you say worldview, they think of apologetics,
right?
Which is a good thing. I love apologetics, but that's actually not what I'm meaning when I use the term worldview. I am talking about basically how we think and those presuppositions. So presuppositions are the ideas behind everything. The simplest way to get to it, that the three key, we call them the big three, are what you believe about the nature of God, the nature of man, and the nature of truth. Those three big buckets are what everything can fall into, or some combination of the three. And often we don't understand what we actually believe about that. So take the example of, I believe in God, right? We think of, well, do you believe in God or you don't believe in God? But it's not just, even if I believe in God, what does that mean? What kind of God do I believe in? Because you have huge differences in people who believe in God, whether he's personal, whether he's distant, whether he is a she, or whatever it is. All those definitions. And that one key tenet alone can guide a bunch of our decision making based on the kind of God that we believe in. Same thing with humanity, with truth. Obviously, is it relative? Is it absolute? Is it somewhere in between? But all those things can come down to very simple things we do in life of that. What do we actually believe that's causing us to do those things?
Right. I see.
So it simplifies.
So in terms of God, then, I had a more vague idea of my relationship with God for a long time. And so I wasn't doing as much reflection as I am now. And the more reflection I do now, the more I understand what my relationship is.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a huge thing, because you have people who maybe for years have said, I know God or I love God, but they're not really close to God. And we find, one example I've heard from numerous people of, if you have a negative relationship with your earthly father, right, that we can project onto our heavenly Father, if we believe in God that way, that we think he's like that. And we often have different underpinnings there that we don't realize. It's not just enough to profess certain things, but actually reflecting, why do I feel this way? What is my belief behind this? And that can go to other areas too, just even on business. I want to have a business. I want to be a good business person, but what are the key tenets of why are you in business? Are you just doing it to make money, which isn't a bad thing? We need to make money. But is your motivation, what's your actual motivation for doing the business? Is it to meet a need? Is it, for me with my dance studio, it was, I wanted to bring the arts in a more affordable way to my community, but I also wanted to help instill character in kids. Being in a dance class produces discipline and, but all those things of, if we look at it with intentionality of what are the the key principles behind why I am doing this.
Right.
And then you can, of course, be more effective because you're more strategic. Hence our name, Go Strategic.
Right.
I love being strategic.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
And it simplifies too, I will say, relative like my children. You know, I have teenage children. I guess they're young adults now, they're not children. But engaging the popular culture right now, looking at what is being said in the media or peer pressure things around them, getting them to ask the questions, well, what does that mean? What is the presupposition behind that? What are they saying through that? Because so often we don't reflect, we just receive. And if we don't reflect on it, we can take on maybe beliefs we don't really want to take on, or also not be as effective.
Yeah, that's true too. And I think partly if you're not clear and you're very busy and very engaged, then it's very difficult to know exactly what you're up to.
Yes.
There has to be some time of reflection.
For sure.
Yeah. And that isn't exactly talked about, really, is it?
I think we have such a busy culture.
Yeah.
And I know I'm guilty of it. I mean, especially if you are, even those of us that want to change the world and do good things, we get busy, and the time for quiet reflection is so important. I know that's an area I'm trying to increase.
I have to
in my life.
Something I did this morning because I think it's kind of funny, but I might do it again actually, but we'll see.
Okay.
So I pray the rosary every morning. But I also need to do Pilates very regularly because I had health issues, and so I need to keep myself strong, you know. So today I was doing Pilates, praying the rosary.
Oh, very nice. I love it. It's a great combo.
It wasn't bad, actually.
It's a good combo.
I thought, I could maybe put these together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you think that's a possibility?
Oh, yes. No, actually, I'm aware of a couple groups that have taken some of the scriptures and aligned it with some of the yoga practices,
That's
which
what
I know is kind of controversial with a few folks.
I'm kind of thinking maybe this is a good idea.
Well, look, I don't think our bodies, what we do with our bodies has not been cornered by one particular religion or philosophy.
That's right.
So it's not like if I'm doing downward dog that the Hindu religion owns that.
That's right.
You know, it's our body.
That's right.
So I love, and the holistic connection, again, you know, going back to me being a dancer.
Yeah.
There's such a connection.
I was a yoga
mind,
teacher.
body. Yes, I know. I remember you telling me that.
Right.
And I love yoga as well. And, but there's such a connection there. And I do think we miss that probably in more the Western culture. Of course, we see it in other cultures.
Well, I was meditating for years with yoga, not realizing until I read Thomas Merton that it should be scripturally based, my meditation. And so then if meditation can be scripturally based, then so can the postures.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, I know there's some people that are doing that.
Oh, I didn't know
Unfortunately, I cannot remember the names right now of the but there's
just look it
several.
up.
Yes, but I know there are people that are doing that, and I think it's really, it makes sense. I mean, we're holistic
if people
beings.
are concerned about the intention, that would take care of that.
Yes, exactly.
Because that was something that people have. I put out a yoga video, and people were concerned about the intention in it. But if I put scripture with it, then that would be plain, wouldn't it? Strategic networking and collaboration.
I love that.
So not only are you helping individuals to reflect and to lead, then it's about collaborating and networking. So this is a strategic thing in the workplace, in society. So will you explain to me how that is?
Yes. So I have a real personal passion for that. And I've always been that way. I'm a people person, and I've always thought strategically, I guess. You know, the Lord knew when I got into the family I was born into. That's just how I think. And I love to bring people and organizations together. Because we're just often, we're very busy, and or sometimes we're in our little silo where we have our blinders on and don't realize that we have people running parallel to us in another lane that we could actually be so much more effective together. So our organization does a lot of that. And I'll just say personally, I'm that type of person. You know, if you go to my hometown, a lot of people know me just because I'm always connecting people and running in different circles because I want to, and I think it's beautiful to have community. And our organization, because of what we do, we have our key tenets and our principles, and then they play out, and we have 3 different online schools that we do. And one focuses on worldview and leadership, one focuses on business and economics, and one focuses on public policy and community development. They all have similar principles that run throughout, but then it's how do you build that out? Those are all very different lanes, right? So that kind of uniquely positions us because we work with lots of different organizations that wouldn't normally work with one another. So we will do events and different just connections with people to connect those kind of parallel groups to one another, because it's just much more efficient. And we find, I'll give you an example of waste of it that when there's waste in certain areas, it's so hard for me to see, especially when we have so much need in the world. We were just in Africa last year and we did one of these events. We brought 30 different organizations together that didn't know one another or had heard of one another, but hadn't had the time or wherewithal to get connected. But I was talking with someone there and he gave me the example, in Africa, of course, there's abundant need in a lot of places, but in a certain town where there was 2 different groups digging wells in the same town, both renting the same equipment, that they could have just rented the equipment once, and each of them used it, and they both would have, achieved the same goal of digging these wells. But there's no connection at all between them in this little town. And I think, oh my goodness, if you had been connected to one another,
and how would you connect them?
Because
in a strategic way, so that they would get along.
Getting the groups to talk to one another is some of it. You do have, dare I say it, sometimes you do have people that get competitive and you think, oh my goodness, we're in philanthropy. But sometimes that happens. But it also is just a lack of awareness. You've got a lot of people very well intentioned and they just have limited resources, limited awareness. So because of the different circles that we run in, I try very intentionally to find out who's doing what so we can connect them to one another. So we do a lot of that when we go into a particular region.
And so are you across the world quite a bit?
Yes, we are Central America, Brazil, Africa. South Africa is probably our largest group of people but we're in numerous countries trying to connect them to one another. Francophone Africa, we have partners in France who work with a lot of Francophone Africa. And here in Europe, some in Asia. So, and again, it's wherever you find people who carry the same sound and you're, connecting with them. And that's, again, I'm finding a lot of those people here. I will say the sound that I'm looking for in these kind of people are people who are committed to transformation, not just for what's around them, but for themselves. And people who are lifelong learners. That's what I love. I get that from you and your spirit right away when I met you. You get it that there's always more, and the benefit of staying curious and wanting to continue to grow as a person and grow what's around you. So those are the kind of people
finding the puzzle pieces and putting them in their place, and it takes, a lot of reflection and strategy to find where they should be.
Yeah, exactly that.
Make it move.
Reflection and strategy, and that's very much what we try to do is looking at who's who and who should connect with whom and how can we do better. And sometimes I'm just directing traffic. I'm in the middle. It's not going to be our organization. I'm just going to have these 2 talk, and they'll be on their way.
Right.
Which is great. Whatever we can do to further these good works, we want to do that.
And so, say you go into an African village or city, wherever you are. How do you approach them? That you want to talk to them and to.
So I'll give you an example. I just was in Uganda a couple months ago, and so before I went in, I was invited by some wonderful people. Actually, the gentleman who invited me, Professor Vincent Anigbogu, he is here at the ARC event.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful man working actively in Nigeria and Uganda, training Africans for engaging their local communities and public policy, business, all that. But so he invited me into this event. So he invited me and I was going for that, but I asked, could I have some time around the event that I was going to speak at? Can I set some meetings up? And so we were at a hotel. And so what I did was I just reached out to several of the key people I know and said, who do you know is doing work in Kampala? Let's get them together. I set up several different dinners And it was amazing. One of the people that we brought together, they literally lived 20 minutes from each other, didn't know one another existed or what their organizations were doing. And we just brought them in, let's have dinner. And so that's how it, and all these people were connected through people we already had vetted, for lack of a better term. So, you do want a level of, you can't always do a complete open call for anyone to come.
Right.
So if you have a level of relationship and you say, hey, who do you know? Because there's a few people I already knew, but then I asked them.
How many times do you think you have to meet someone before you have a level of relationship?
That is a great question, Tammy, because honestly, that really, I think, comes down to discernment. Sometimes I feel like I would say in the spirit, for those who are familiar with that terminology, sometimes I feel like you can sense that right away. And others, I think it takes time. So no matter what, I think there's always some level of vetting, and trust is built over time. That's one of the key principles we talk about actually in our schools, about the bridge of trust. It takes time. What's the weight load?
Do you think it often takes a certain amount of time, like 3 visits or something? Is there something like that, like a rule?
I'm sure maybe for some level of intimacy, for lack of a better term.
Of intimacy where you can have a deeper conversation.
Yeah. I mean, every blue moon, I've maybe had that with someone straight out the gate in the beginning, but most of the time, I think it takes probably a few meetings, like you said.
Yeah.
But I think
I have to be this is something that I'm only just learning. And like I said, I was in a massage therapy room for a very long time, all by myself, right? So this is very different to be in podcasts and also traveling with my husband and meeting people. So I have to
totally different.
learn all of this, right? And so one thing that I'm learning now, you'll get into a meeting with someone or a group of people, and there's something that's really pressing between them and another group. And you're in there and you know about this, but you don't know them very well. And it's the first meeting. What can you expect for the first meeting? Actually, I found out all you can expect is to hear some stories from each of them, and to tell them some stories about ourselves. But other than that, especially if you have never, and they're from a very long, far away, you've never met them, it's now time to just be introduced. And not, even though there's this thing that's right there that everybody wants to talk about, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. And, at the end of this meeting that was very cordial and everything, one person got up and I had stepped away, so I wasn't right in the center, but I could hear him, and he did mention the issue that it was at hand, but he just kind of mentioned it in a very defined moment that couldn't be elucidated on right now. It would be something that they could be talking about next time, and we know it's there. We're aware this is here. We're aware that's and that was it.
And that was it.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Well, timing matters for sure.
It was
depending on what you're dealing with. I mean, obviously you're going into a meeting that could be possibly contentious. You're going to handle it a certain way, or if it's just a new person you're meeting, timing definitely matters. That's something I feel like I've definitely learned. I'm very straight shooter. Let's get to it. And I've learned over the years that to back that up a bit.
Right.
Because we need to, not everyone's like that.
No.
And also timing really matters, because it's, even when you want to get to the truth of something, right? I think of our passion now with so many things in the world, we want to just go for it. And it's but we have to look at the timing of it. And just because something, another idea we talk about sometimes in the organization I work at is rights versus righteousness. There's things that you have a right to do, but is it the righteous thing to do? That goes into ethics, of course, right? Like how we discern, just because something's right, quote unquote, doesn't mean this is the right time or the right way or, all those things. So I think that goes into what you're talking about with people too, of discerning what's appropriate in that setting.
Yeah. And, I think I've learned in my family and with and my larger family too, you have to be aware of the situation, and then touchy points, especially when you know someone,
Yes.
right? Because then you are privy to things you could say that would inflame the
Yes.
situation. And so it's really a delicate dance that
Yes.
you make together. And it's a challenge to do that and something to look forward to becoming good at,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that take a lifetime to hone that skill.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something I'm striving towards to be better at, because I know I did not do it as well when I was younger.
Right. No, me neither.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
But so much of it is about people, right? I know we're passionate about truth, and and there's principles that work, but at the end of the day, it comes back to people, loving your neighbor,
Yeah.
seeing Imago Dei in them, and
What's Imago Dei?
the image of God
Okay.
in them. Yeah.
And is that, what National Day is that?
I think it's a Latin term, isn't
it's
it? Imago Dei
it's
is Latin, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to learn some Latin.
Yeah. It's on my
If I'm
list
going to
too.
be in the Roman Catholic Church, I'm going to have to learn some Latin.
I love languages. That's why I always say, in another life, I would be fluent in numerous languages, but
Yeah.
it takes so much time to learn this thing.
Yeah.
But
There's
yes, it's,
Duolingo. You could always
I
try
know,
that.
yes.
That's not an ad, but
yeah. But yeah, that we all have the image of God. We're made in his image. And
Yeah.
so that's part of what allows us, as we should hopefully be, respect for one another.
and
Because
so that's part of this goes strategic then too.
yeah, well,
Yes?
going back to that key tenet, that principle of that we believe that everyone was made in the image of God,
Yeah.
and that's the sanctity of life and the respect. Going back to the big two from the scriptures. Those who are familiar with the Bible that way, there's the first one is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. Second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the big two for basically, if you had to boil, that's what they asked Jesus in the scripture, right? The Pharisee said, well, how do you boil down the law? What does it come down to? It just comes down to those two simple things. Love the Lord, love your neighbor. But again, what does love mean? That's another, we look at the presupposition behind that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different definitions of love. Is love just doing what we think is going to make the person feel better? Or is there an actual standard of love being what's best for the person and
Yes.
all that?
Right.
And that's a whole other conversation. But again, coming down to is humans connecting with one another and death to self.
And death to self. Jordan and I had a conversation the other day about, I was just outlining, I said, so my values are, and I'd never really thought about the hierarchy of my values, so I was defining them, and God and my husband and my children and my grandchildren and me. And then I thought, no, God and my husband and my children and my grandchildren and what I can do for others. And actually, I'm not even in that, which is better. It's even better, which is what I noticed when my child was born. It's like, oh, it's not about me, it's about her now.
Yes.
Thank goodness for that.
Yes.
Because I've had enough already. I don't know. I think especially women, I don't know if it's like that for men, but as a woman, you're kind of, because women are looked at, because we're looked at, we get focused on. When we have a child, then the focus is on the child. And it's a gift to have that happen.
Yes. I mean, when I became a mom, it changed everything
It
for
changes
sure. There's
everything.
nothing like it. And it's a amazing blessing and gift to be able to, I mean, you can't even describe it, obviously, carrying another human being and then what you feel for them. I
Yes.
remember my father actually distinctly saying to me when I was young, he said, you'll never understand how much I love you until you have a child of your own.
Right.
Because you just can't verbalize it
No, you can't see
because
it.
of what it is.
Yeah, my sister told me, she was older than me, she said, when you have your baby, you're going to enter into a club that you didn't know existed.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it was true. We lived in Montreal and we used to go to a diner for breakfast, this little French diner, and there would be, lumberjacks and stuff in there. It was working class Italian part of town, and I bring my little daughter in there and put her little chair up to the table and he turns around and he goes, coochie, coochie, coo.
This big lumberjack. Yes. Isn't that funny? They'll turn men to mush.
Yes.
Little babies will.
That's right.
I love seeing that.
Yeah. And so I thought, oh yeah, so I'm a member of a club I didn't know
Yes.
existed.
Yes.
And people right in the middle of the street will stop.
Oh,
you
yeah.
and, oh, look at that baby, and they would have never even
Well, your
noticed
daughter is
me.
very beautiful, I will say.
Well, she was just a baby. She was beautiful.
She was probably a
then,
beautiful
too.
baby too.
Yeah, she's beautiful, beautiful, lovely lady.
Yeah.
Smart. And doing hard things.
You guys have done well, both your children.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing she's alive, really.
Yes, I know. I know a little bit about that story from you guys, just a bit. But yes, well, all of you, really. God's hand on all of you.
So let's talk about localism a little bit, because that's what we're talking about at the ARC, is the necessity for making a change at the local level.
Yes.
So you talk about that in your company, localism.
Yes. So one of the analogies we like to use, we talk about tending your garden, right? We're all planted in a garden, and we have a responsibility for that garden. So I'm not responsible for, even though of course, what I do may affect my neighbor's house, I'm first responsible for my home, right? My garden, my place. And we really do believe in divine planting. I really do believe that God has a place for us to live. And of course, that can change. We have different seasons of life. We may move to different places. But I believe that we are called to a place, right? And where we are called to, what are we doing to better that space? And so that's everything from, I know this sounds silly, but so many people don't even know their neighbors. Just knowing your neighbors. So for me, when I moved into our neighborhood, I right away went and I introduced myself to our neighbors, and I started arranging progressive dinners where we once or twice a year get together in progressive dinners. And now that sounds like a simple little thing, but let me tell you, where I live, I am the minority with my belief system. Most of the people would be very far other side of the political spectrum from myself, and an ideological spectrum. And yet, because we got together and they got to know me first over sharing a meal, and, if your dog gets out, I'm going to help bring your dog back to the house, and just being a neighbor, roll their trash out when they're out of town.
Right.
Just the little neighborly things. That has allowed me such incredible relationship with people who I probably they would have never been friends with me.
Right.
I know they wouldn't. They already told me when they found out at a certain point what my beliefs were, they were like, what? But they're like, but I like you. I said, I know, because we're neighbors and friends and people first. And then when you realize, oh, wow, you have some really different beliefs. But then we had that bridge of trust and that relationship first, so we could have some hard conversations that would have ended before we wouldn't have even talked.
Right.
But now, because so it's a very simple application there, but we're trying to get to know your neighbors. But then also locally, a lot of people think, and this is one thing we really try to push people to be active locally. I'm from the United States. We have a lot of people who only maybe focus on the big elections, like presidential. Yes, please vote in the presidential election. However, there are a ton of local elections that people don't even show up for. And the local elections actually have a bigger effect on a certain level than the national ones, and people don't vote in them. So it's a simple thing. I'm like, are you because people miss it? It doesn't get the press, and there are these missed little small elections in between that if people just showed up for that, what would it do? And that one last example I'll give again locally, and this is something I do. I'm on several local boards. It doesn't take a huge amount of my time, but it gets me involved in the community. So I'm not just complaining about issues in the community, but I'm involved in trying to affect them. And most local communities have local boards that have to have a community member at large. They're required to have that. So you don't have to necessarily have, some people say, well, I don't have the resume for that, but they want community members. And you can find out about that in your local counties or cantons or wherever you live, that those things exist. And again, we have a lot of people, especially in the evangelical Christian world, that are not involved, but then they complain about the policies that are happening, but they're not actually involved locally to help change it.
Yeah. Well, Jordan talks about if, your complaint is your problem.
Yes.
It's something that you are concerned with that maybe someone else isn't concerned with, and the change will not come because they're not interested, but you're interested.
Exactly. So you have the passion for it. That gives you a hint to your purpose.
Yeah.
To go after it.
It's a hint. Yes, it's a hint.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's good to know, because it is hard to find out where you can be effective in your community. Well, just find out what you see that needs being done, and that'll usually come up as an irritation.
Yep. Yeah, it does. It's what bothers you, and you can start small. Everybody can. Yeah. You don't have to. I think we get overwhelmed because we get busy, and obviously for many people, day-to-day life is a lot, especially if you have young children or you travel a lot or whatever it is. But there are small ways that you really can make a difference, and so modeling it locally, I think is huge.
I'll tell you a funny story about, people like to hear about Jordan. I'll tell you a funny story about Jordan. So when we go to the...
Do tell. It's just you and I. No one else will know.
Nobody's going to know. That's right. So when we go to the airport, as soon as he'd come in, and this was years ago, he started to see the signs of authoritarianism in the airport. And you know what I mean now because of what it's like. And I made a deal with him. I guess I enforced a rule, but it seemed like a deal. He agreed to it anyway, to not speak until he got to the gate. Because he would just be muttering
I'm sure
the whole time because it was just boiling over inside him, you know. And I said, so he managed that. But eventually I had to say, if you say something, because once he became public and started writing public things, so now I can say, if you say something, you have to write a public.
There you go.
Paper on it.
Okay.
If it's not worth writing a public paper, it's actually not worth bringing up, and so you don't have to actually say anything about it.
I think that's a very fair agreement. I like that.
Do you like that?
Yeah, I do actually, very much so.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And man, I can imagine for him
when he
in
did
those settings.
come downstairs that day and said, I'm really upset about what's going on at the university, and I said, write a public paper, what could happen? Yeah, so...
Well, and that again goes back to what we're talking about with reflection, because things can bother us, but we don't even necessarily know why does it bother me so much.
Yeah.
So taking the time to go, and that to me gets back to that presuppositional idea of, because sometimes the thread goes further down than we realize.
Yeah.
And when we can further identify the roots that way, we're more effective in the problem solving.
Yeah.
So having that time to reflect.
Up being very far down into something.
Yes.
So that when he said, I got to talk about something, he was down to a very kind of basic bedrock of our society. And so when he said it just woke everybody up.
Yep.
And frightened a lot of people too, because they didn't even know it was there.
Right. Yeah. He uncovered it. And then he knew it. Because if you can trace, that's what I love again about understanding these, when you can get to the key principles of things, ask the right questions. And, we got that in the Socratic method on a level, of course, but there's asking those questions, discerning, well, what do you mean by that? What's behind that? And like I said, even going to those simple things of what does this mean about the nature of truth or the nature of man or the nature of God, and looking at those key things, it's very empowering actually, because it simplifies things. But so often we don't, we have this beautiful giant flower and we don't realize all the roots that are underneath it.
Yes.
So so again, that goes back to your example, honestly, the thing in the airport, because that one little comment of why this one thing bothers me and then tracing it back, it's quite brilliant, really.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then you're more effective in explaining it to others also.
Yeah.
Because we can vocalize
give a little story like that. Give a little story, then you can see, oh yeah.
Yes.
I can see how you could be very effective if you've dug down deep into something. And then you can see it on the surface and it'll bug you.
Yes.
And you just dig down in there and there it is.
Yep.
Something very important that needs to be said.
Yes.
And then there comes free speech. You need to say that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Servant leadership. How do you define servant leadership?
So
how is that reflected in your work? Sorry. That's okay.
Your husband was just talking about this. Because when we were in Santa Rosa, when you and I met, when he was speaking, I turned to my husband, my dad were with me, and he was like, servant leadership, because that's what he was getting to. He was using different terms.
Yeah.
But looking at the reality of sacrifice.
Okay.
We would say he who serves leads. Again, going back to the scripture, those who are familiar with Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and different examples of where, he was in it with them. He wasn't just way ahead on the peak of, and that we're called, again, going back to loving your neighbor, that if you're really going to be a leader, it really is about service. Because otherwise, of course, we see the other spectrum where power will corrupt that way. That we need the balance of our perspective, again, of motivation. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this for the title? Am I doing this for the money?
Yeah.
Am I doing this for the fame? Am I doing this because I feel it's a calling. I believe it's going to produce something positive for other people, or I'm combating an injustice. Your motivation. So, and servant leadership is really the one that produces the most prosperity, sustainable prosperity, because it's not, we know that from dictatorships don't work, obviously, in the long run, and they hurt people and they don't produce positive fruit. Whereas servant leaders, they're the ones that you can trust, that they've been there, they've done that. They're not too good to do certain things.
Right.
So, and that's, again, I think people being seen. And honestly, actually, this reminds me of the first time I met your husband. It impressed me, and I saw the same thing in you. But I met him last year at the ARC event, and just a brief exchange, I introduced myself, and but he was so present, and he easily could have a giant ego, and maybe he does. I don't think he does. I was going to jokingly say, as his spouse, you could say, well, no, I do not get that from him.
I try to find it.
I do not get that from him at all. No, but he could if he wanted to, in the sense of both of you with the level of attention now and well-earned respect, all those things. But he, when I interacted with him, he was very just like you are, in the moment. I felt very seen. It wasn't him up there and me down here.
Right.
And you get that with a lot of other people, and I can see how it would happen when people get a lot of attention, but it communicated to me just the authenticity of who he is. And again, when I met you a few weeks ago, I got the same spirit of, we're here and we just want to connect with people, and it's not this hierarchy feeling.
Right.
And you see that in people. And when you see that in leaders, I remember my father actually told me he met Nelson Mandela years ago. And he said, again, when he met him, he said he just oozed forgiveness. That's what he said. He just oozed forgiveness. And
wow.
And for someone who could have been obviously insanely bitter, to just, and those are the leaders we want to follow. And so trying to get people, not just I want to change the world, but are you willing to change yourself? That's a servant leader. Are we going to look at ourselves? Are we willing to take out the trash, to, do the, are we above certain things, or are we willing to actually get our hands dirty?
Yeah.
So that's what we're after, because that's what lasts. Those are people I want to follow.
How much of his life did he devote to this company?
Well, he's 82 now, and he's still involved, still on the board, still very passionate about things. He was here for 2 days of this event. I know you got to see him briefly. Yeah,
I did.
Yes,
see him?
Yeah, just briefly. He was in passing.
Yeah.
So he was able to come this year.
Good.
And
that's good.
But he's given his life to it. Talk about servant leadership. With what he's done, and others I know in similar fields like him, it's a real sacrifice. It's exhausting to try to rally the troops, so to speak, and inspire people and equip people.
Yeah.
You're not doing it for the money. You're not doing it for the fame. You guys know this too, that people are not going to like sometimes what you say, all the drama that can swirl around it. But he's really dedicated his life to it because he believes it's what God had called him to do, and trying to educate and connect and inspire people to live these principles out in their life. So he, 45 years of it, when he started it back in 1979, and bringing us, again, us kids into it, and the generational momentum. It's interesting, all three of us, there's three of us in the family, are all, I would say, embodying what his message and the message that we've been trying to, give to others from being involved and where you're called and such. We've all done it in different ways. So, but we've all been involved with the ministry that I work for in different capacities at different times. So my brother's on the board, my sisters work with us. Actually, everyone in the family at some point we've sucked in.
Yeah.
My niece actually works for me. So that's third generation
cool.
At the organization, which is pretty awesome.
That is. That's awesome.
So we call that generational momentum too.
Yeah.
And I want to say on that, not everyone can do the same career, for lack of a better term, as their parents. I understand that. But I think there's still a spirit of that momentum that people can carry, that we're taking on the values.
Well, hopefully with the generations, it will change because of the times, but have the same spirit.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that would be what you would hope for. Right?
Yes. That even if I'm not, I'm not
Because then it stays relevant.
Yes. Yeah. That whatever you do, you're doing what you were called to do. I believe people have different giftings and different skill sets. We need to pursue what those are, find out what they are, and carry that spirit that hopefully our family, my family's always had a spirit of hospitality. And I'm trying to keep that. I grew up, people were always in our house. We hosted people all the time. And I have tried to carry that. Now I have a tiny house because I live in California.
Okay.
So I have a small little house that, real estate prices are insanely expensive, but I have a large yard. So I will host, and we live in California, so we have pretty good weather.
Yes.
So I can't host in the exact same way my parents did, but I can host in a different way with my circumstances, which means we do things outside. So I know it's a little example, but the spirit of whatever, hopefully in a positive way you've received from your parents that you can build upon. I learned from them. Hopefully my kids are learning from me.
Yeah.
And we're echoing that out. And then of course, that's what I'm doing at the organization at Go Strategic, building on. We say I'm standing on my father's shoulders.
Yeah.
Hopefully going further with what he's been passionate about so that it extends beyond us.
And you said are your kids involved in it, did you say? Or
Well,
not?
my niece works for me, and actually both my daughters have been roped in at one time or the other,
okay.
based on
So they've
skill
touched
sets.
it.
Yes, based on skill sets for what was needed. So they've been involved that way too, and they're actually enrolled in the courses that we have. These online schools, we've got third generation doing them as
And
well.
you told me about the schools. There's 3 schools.
So there's 3 schools. They're all based. They're done in cohorts. They're 18 months to 2 years. So it's a big commitment. It's basically you're joining a small group, for lack of a better. You're joining a small group. I'd say it's the equivalent of maybe a 1 or 2 unit college course because you're getting audio, video.
2 units? What do you mean?
Traditional, at least in the States, traditional college course would be about 3 units. If you take it in a semester.
Yeah.
So
3 credits. We
3
would call
credits.
in
Yes.
Canada.
Yes.
Units. Okay.
So if you were looking for an academic parallel, I would say it's like a 1 or 2 credit unit course.
Yeah.
Because there is an academic quote unquote portion to it, but that's because you're learning the principles. But then in the small groups, you meet with a small group twice a month, these cohorts, you're digesting it because our goal is not just head knowledge, but wisdom, heart change, that I don't just know these things, but I actually embody them, apply them to my life, apply them to my community, to my business, to my church, whatever realm you're working in. So there's 3 of them. There's one that focuses on worldview and leadership, one that's focused on business and economics, and one that we just put out on public policy and community development.
That's a new one.
Yes.
Oh, and that's very good. And that's interesting that it's new. Jordan and I, maybe 9 months ago or something, started talking about civic responsibility.
Yes.
So that's very much in the...
It's in the mix now, and it needs to be. It needs to be.
And, well, we've realized, oh my goodness, we've given over all of the power to tyrants.
Exactly.
And what does that mean? That means that the people on the local level aren't doing the civic duty that's necessary. We've given them too much power.
Yep. And we need to not just take that back in the sense of, fight the power, but but we're not really fully functioning, I would say, if we're not really fully responsible citizens that way, right? Because it grows us up, and locally, who better knows how to handle the local needs? The gentleman, I think it was yesterday, that sang the song. He was talking about in North Carolina. Oh, he was wonderful.
Wasn't he great?
Yeah, he was great. I love his spirit.
Yes.
But he was for context for the listeners, he was talking about we'd had these devastating flooding and things from a hurricane that came through North Carolina in the United States. And he was giving the example, it was the local people. It was not FEMA, which is our disaster response group. It was the local people that actually got in there, made a difference, because locally they know what their community needs.
Right. And
They
where
know,
to get it.
They know where the generators are. They know where the food, they know. And that's where if we abdicate that responsibility, we're going to be stuck with waiting on the bigger, it's got to be on the local level. And that's,
it's got to be.
Yeah. And that's actually, side note, that's what my brother does. You could have him on sometime because he's a very interesting guy. He basically is the faith-based liaison in our county. And this is a very secular county in California. But they have had him actually hired on to help bridge between all the faith-based communities. So Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, all, and meeting the needs of the community because they're in the community. They know the community needs. So this is from everything from disaster response to fires. Wildfires are a big thing where we are.
Yes.
Foster care, homelessness.
So were the fires close to where you were?
Yeah. Oh, a huge portion of Santa Rosa burned back in 2018, 2019. It was a different set of fires. And obviously we just had the ones in Southern California.
Right.
But ours were a few years back, very devastating. I had lots of friends lose everything. It was very scary. Actually, everyone came to my tiny home. As I mentioned, where we were was not an evacuation zone. And so we had actually a friend from Switzerland was visiting at that time. And my parents and my brother's family.
Everybody.
There was 14 of us in my 1,100 square foot home. But hey, it was kind of fun. But yeah, so the fire's there. But again, on the local level, the locals know.
Yeah.
Or they should know. But again, that's why we've got to be more connected that way.
My dad was a great civic person. He was on the hospital board. He was on the board, the curling rink board. He was on the insurance board, the real estate board.
Wow.
He was
entrenched.
He was just, the president of the Lions Club and president of the Kinsmen. And so he was just that kind of, he was a local businessman who just showed up. He showed up at all these different places and took his part, and he was busy. I didn't see him as often as I wanted, for sure. But there were other reasons for that too, that wasn't all he did. He played a lot of sports and sometimes he was drinking too much. And so I didn't see him as much as I wanted to, but he really was good about civic duty. A good example.
A good example.
You saw the value. Someone who was putting himself out there and having his voice be heard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And see, that's something you're taking as generational momentum.
Isn't that nice?
Yes, but you guys see that thread coming through you and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's the thread. And it's always good to look back at your parents to see who they were, I find. For me, it was good for me to look back and see who they were and see what I could be grateful for and to see what gifts they've given me.
Yes.
Because there are gifts. Sometimes you have to do quite a bit of reflection to find them.
Yes.
But it's worth it.
Yes.
Because then you can stand on their shoulders.
Yes. Yes.
And you want to be able to do that.
And as complicated as many people have complicated parental relationships, but I found, I don't know if I know someone yet who has, even with tough circumstances with their parents, if they take the time, haven't been able to reflect and see still some positive that they can build on.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So you have a worldview handbook.
Yes.
Is that what you gave
That's
me?
the little one. That's what I gave you. And it's the little one I was talking about a little bit earlier that just simplifies presuppositional thinking. What do we believe about the nature of God, the nature of man, the nature of truth?
Okay.
And that little handbook has been great just for starting conversations for people. I actually did a test run of it on my daughter's 8th grade homeschool co-op.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you can't teach it to 8th graders, these 14-year-olds, I mean, they're a tough audience.
That's right.
They're a tough audience. And so I did a practice run of teaching it to them. And it was wonderful to hear their conversations. And we would take that framework and apply it to a popular culture issue. We had when I was first writing it, that was during in the United States, the Black Lives Matter movement and, other issues around sexuality and transgenderism or even just ethics in business. And I would basically take them through different scenarios and you can map it out. You basically go, what is this issue and what does it say if you believe this about that and take it down to those underlying presuppositions.
Right. How can education play a role in leadership?
Well, I think all of us, this goes back to, I think, a bit earlier, talking about even the servant leadership side and the importance of changing ourselves, transformation. But no one is a self-made man.
Right.
Jesus wasn't even a self-made man. And that there's always more that we can learn, and we need to take the time to educate ourselves.
Right.
I know in Christian circles, sometimes people get a little heavy on the there's scriptures that talk about, the Lord will tell you what to say in the moment and all these things. And there's truth to that, and that's good.
I think that's good.
At the same time, we also, some people will get so heavy on I'll just figure it out. God will tell me what to do.
Right.
And then they lose weight. We need to do due diligence of actually studying, learning, training, that's a part of stewardship of our minds and our bodies. We talked about earlier with just keeping care of ourselves, Pilates and dance and yoga, that all those things connect into the holistic being of who we are. And I think we have a responsibility as human beings to educate ourselves. And let me say this too. I think it's really important. If truth is truth, we don't need to be scared about educating ourselves with other belief systems. I know some people, again, get a little scared. Well, we see that now with the censorship side, right? That's happening globally.
Yeah.
You can't talk about that because somehow it's going to offend somebody. But hey, I'm not scared. If I really believe what is the truth's going to win in the end. Yeah. There's one of my favorite African proverbs says that truth is like oil. It always rises to the top. You know that phrase. And so, we need to be educated on things, and especially if we're engaging in the culture and trying to affect our communities, we need to understand what other people believe, why they believe it, and the issues that are at hand. It's easy to write off a certain issue of, let's take homelessness for an example, right? It affects us negatively, but to just push it off like, oh, well, it's just because they won't, to prescribe some reason for it when we haven't actually looked into the root causes of homelessness. There's a lot more going on there than just someone who's a lazy addict or something. But people will do that if they don't educate themselves on why are those people like that? What got them to that place? And so I think empathy of taking the time to educate yourself, especially again, if it's something you're passionate about, that we need to take the time to understand it better. So those things that irritate you, like we were talking about earlier, that stuff that gets under your skin that you go, well, that's your problem. Well, let's not just say it's bad, but let's understand how it got there and what we can do to help it. So that's why I think
the Albertans right now talked about homelessness. He brought that up. Dan Williams is a politician in Alberta that I'm actually going to go to the prayer breakfast there, and he invited me to go. But he grew up, his father brought in homeless people into their home. And so he grew up with homeless people. And now Alberta is setting up a way to take the people off the street. And they're doing a comprehensive job of it, so that they're getting what they need. They're not separating them from their dogs and the cats and stuff like that. Like they're doing this in a way that seems to be working, and they're hoping that they can scale that, replicate it in other places. So just that is a very it's something that we have to dig ourselves into because we have to understand it.
It's a huge need across the board, and I would say one of the areas, the root causes, is the breakdown of the family, which we've been talking about here as well at the event, because you've got such a breakdown with so many people's family situations where in the past you just didn't have as much of that because they had more intact families, or you had families that were willing to still keep you and help you if you were struggling. There's a bunch of cultural shifts that way, or just to begin with, they didn't even have an intact family to begin with. And so they didn't have that.
No, it's just safety. You're right. It's a sign of the demise of the family.
I mean, there's obviously multiple factors, but I would say that's probably a very significant one that has contributed to it.
Yeah, well, we're working on that, aren't we?
That's right. Yes, we got to get back to healthy families.
And then I would say, what do you see as the vision for the future of your company?
That's a good question. I just did a teaching a few months ago on seasons of your business, taking just a different, with the analogy of, spring, summer, fall, winter, all that. And that was don't want to take full credit for that because it's my father's teaching that I expanded upon. So give him credit for that. But and I'm sure others have talked about this as well. But I think sometimes we assume certain seasons. I want longevity. At the same time, I recognize there are seasons, right? So we have actually, before I became the CEO of the organization, we spent a year as the board of our organization in prayer and reflection to just go, does this organization have a life beyond its founder?
Right.
Because some don't.
Right. Some don't.
And some don't. And some don't, but then try to force it, and then it doesn't work out well. And we didn't want to be that. I said, look, I don't have to hold on to this. He doesn't want to have to hold on to this. Is this what God has for us? And so we spent a year reflecting on that. After that time, felt very strongly, hey, it does have a life beyond its founder, and we want to build on that. And that's when I was placed as CEO 4 years ago. But recognizing it's going to be a different organization when it's not run by the founder. And we're in different times. So we have shifted our model a bit to more, I would say, regional leadership. And, he produced a wonderful foundation for us of tons of incredible content and directives. And so I think in this new season, collaboration is probably another step for us of more of that, trying to bring other groups together and strategically broker and connect people. And I say broker not in the sense of financial, but in the sense of let's make this happen between you two.
Well, I wondered if since 2020, if people have become separated some more than they were before, and now is there a new need to get people to collaborate?
Well, there definitely is a need, just because of the state of the world, right? And things are accelerating so quickly and with so technology, and the global playing field we're so global now. It's totally different than even 10 years ago. But at the same time, I'll say on a positive side of just the vision, I've seen so many people in even just the last couple years way more interested in working together than they were before. I think people are starting to realize again the importance of working together, putting ego aside. And look, we may not agree on everything, but there's so much that we do with many people. Let's focus on that. So for our organization, we want to continue to equip the people who resonate with our sound and our content and this message, and then connect the people that really want to affect change globally. And then after that, I don't know. We'll see what God has.
That's right.
I remember for years I struggled because I've been involved in lots of different things, which, we don't have time to talk about everything, but I was very involved in sexuality, relationship education for many years in public schools. I had my artistic side with my dance studio and dance, and I'm in this ministry nonprofit world. Reason I bring this up is I felt for years, am I like schizophrenic? Because I'm involved in all these different things. And my mentor at the time said to me, she said, no, you're a decathlete. And when she gave me that analogy, I felt much better. I said, okay, well, I'm a decathlete. And the good thing on that, though, is to recognize, and for other decathletes out there, that may mean that you are just in that one thing for a certain period of time. You're in that event for a certain period of time, and then you may go do something else.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing.
No.
There can be a both and of I'm going to carry hopefully the same spirit and the same values and same principles, but it may look different in a different season of my life.
Well, we'll see, I guess.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, thank you very much.